Thank you, Mark. You actually set a very good example for us in terms of time, which everyone is definitely going to follow. Our second speaker is Mustafa Akyol. He's a senior fellow at the Cato Institute here in DC, and his presentation is on how Islamic values can contribute to building a free society.
Thank you so much, Asma. Thanks to the Center for the Study of Islam and Democracy for organizing this event and kindly inviting me as well. It's a difficult time in most of the homelands that we come from, and because it's not the best time for freedom and democracy in the Muslim world, especially the Middle East. No, that's not my slide, but good, okay, killed it. But that's precisely why I think we should keep the good fight, and I really congratulate my friends at the Center for the Study of Islam and Democracy for precisely doing that. Now, how Islamic values can contribute to building a free society. I mean, one can write volumes on this, but I'll just share a few thoughts in the 10 minutes that I have. First, let me remind that religions can vary widely in their interpretations in relation to human freedom. We've seen that in the history of Christianity. Interpretations of Christianity have varied from the Spanish Inquisition, which tortured heretics and persecuted Jews, to the civil rights movement in the United States led by Martin Luther King, which with Christian inspiration and with other religious inspirations too, but for Martin Luther King, for many others, they defended rights, equal rights against the racist bias in this country. And I think that diversity exists in other religions as well, and I think in the world of Islam too. But it's good to recall how Christianity changed in that sense. There was a time, actually, for more than 1,000 years, Christianity was a very oppressive religion, and Jews know this well, because they repeatedly escaped from Christendom to the lens of Islam, which was fear at the time. Because there was the idea that the heretics and the sinners should be punished and brought to discipline. There was also idea of divine rights of kings, that the kings are given a right by God to rule. All those ideas changed gradually with a new interpretation of Christianity, which goes back to the origins of liberalism. By liberalism, I don't mean the center-left ideology in the United States today, but the classical, original liberalism, represented by thinkers like John Locke. And what John Locke did was basically offer a new interpretation of Christianity, where there were no divine rights of kings, but there were rights of men to live freely and have a contractual relationship with the rulers. Also, he brought the idea that states should not uphold one version of Christianity against another and persecute the heretics. No, states should only protect rights, and faith should flourish in civil society. And that changed things not overnight, very gradually, in the Christian world. It took actually a very long time for the Catholic Church to accept those ideas. Now, I believe in Islam, we are seeing a similar transition as well. What I can call Islamic liberalism is in the making in the past 2 centuries. Some people can think, wow, Islam didn't need that. Well, comparatively speaking, actually, until a few years ago, it's true that the Islamic world was the freest part of the world. That's why people escaped from Europe to the lands of Islam. Now it's the other way around for all the reasons that we know. But in Islam, too, in the past 2 centuries, certain intellectuals, certain Islamic scholars realized that we need to embrace more freedom. We need to reinterpret certain things in our religious tradition comparatively, because they realized that that was the main problem in Islam. These thinkers are 19th century figures that we may know. The young Ottomans in the Ottoman Empire, Namık Kemal was the most important figure among them. They realized that a constitutional government that secures rights, limits the ruler, and advances economic and political liberalism is good, and it's even compatible with Islam, with the new approach to the Sharia. So they articulated this, and actually they led to important reforms in the late Ottoman Empire. Another thinker that really contributed to this discussion was from Tunisia, Hayrettin al-Tunusi. Tunisia is a small country that gave a lot of great good minds that helped the Ummah still going on as today. He has this famous book, The Surest Path, Aqwam al-Masalik. The surest path to development, he says, is freedom, economic freedom, political freedom, freedom of the press, and a government limited by rule of law. Those ideas actually led some important reforms in the 19th century, but in the 20th century, we Muslims lost that edge a little bit, to a great extent actually, for a few reasons. Because of Western colonialism, which created reactionary attitudes in Islamic circles, and also secular dictatorships were established in the Muslim world, which didn't need this Islamic liberalism. They needed neither Islam nor liberalism. They just wanted to have this one-party state, right, and imposing what they understand as modernity. But all the bitter conflicts between those forces, I think today we are at a point in the history of the Islamic civilization that we still need to take these ideas of Islamic liberalism seriously. And on that, we have to have a discussion about what the core issue when we speak about Islam and freedom, and Islam and politics. That is the meaning of the Sharia, Islamic law. That's why, I have a book, Why as a Muslim I Defend Liberty. I discuss the two faces of the Sharia, or the two aspects of the Sharia that we have to deal with, because I think there are prospects and challenges when we look at it into the history of Islamic law in the Islamic legal tradition. Well, the challenges are not unknown to us. The challenges that we see in the interpretations of Sharia that has come to us today, that's fiqh, actually, jurisprudence built in medieval times, is that there is a certain dose of religious coercion. Taliban does that in very crude terms, but we see the examples of that in Saudi Arabia, we see that in examples of that in Iran, and certain Islamist movements, and that term is, yes, complicated, also aspire for an application of the Sharia, and even if they are not there, the fact that they have this coercive idea creates an endless resentment and tension in Muslim majority societies. What are these issues? Well, coercion, apostasy laws, blasphemy laws, the idea of hisba, religion police, that police forces will go there and check if women are wearing hijab or not, or whether people are drinking alcohol. The idea of bringing a moral society through coercion, that is a major issue which has to be addressed. And it is. There are Islamic scholars, intellectuals speaking. There are a lot of books published over the years about why actually the Quran doesn't punish apostasy, or blasphemy laws. Actually, they are referred to what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did, but actually it was not about blasphemy, it was about treason to the state. So all these discussions are out there, but these important issues have to be figured out. And I think a clearer understanding of Sharia needs to be put out. On the other hand, there is a strong basis in the Sharia for freedom, for liberalism. People are surprised when I say that. There is, because there was something really important about Sharia which actually did wonders in the classical Islamic civilization. The Sharia was a law that did not come from the ruler. It came from a source that is above the ruler. Actually, it was a higher authority. And actually, people could hold the ruler responsible and constrain the ruler thanks to the Sharia. Because let's not forget, in classical Islamic civilization, law did not come from the dictates of the Sultan or the Caliph himself. There were different periods, but ultimately what consolidated was that law came from God and from the texts of the Quran and Sunnah, and the scholars interpreted that, and those scholars were not mouthpieces of the Sultan. They at times became, and that was a major problem, it still continues to be a problem in certain parts of the Muslim world. But the idea that the law is separate from the ruler, and it has really important implementations or results. For example, in the Ottoman Empire, we have stories, we have episodes of a sultan willing to punish some people out of just his caprice, and the Shaykhul Islam stops the Sultan from doing that. You cannot do this is against the Sharia. We know that Islamic scholars, for example, stopped overtaxation of the population by references to the Sharia. By reference to the Sharia, for example, Ottoman Sultan, Yavuz Sultan Selim the Grim, who was a heavy-handed sultan, considered converting Christians in the Balkans to Islam forcibly because it would be good for the state. But his Shaykhul Islam said, you cannot do this is against the law, and he was actually stopped by that. So, in other words, the Sharia actually upheld a value that became a fundamental value in political liberalism in the modern era, which is called the separation of powers. Montesquieu is historically respected for systematizing this idea that the law and the executive power, they should be separate, and we actually had that in Islamic law. And unfortunately, in the modernization of the Islamic world, Islamic movements kept on believing in the coercive aspects of the Sharia, but that fundamental spirit of the law being separate from the rulers and about the rulers, the Muslim world lost that to a great extent. All the modern leviathans we established in the modern era, from the Turkish Republic to Arab republics, they basically turned into autocratic states where the dictates of the ruler became the law, and we still are living the consequences of that. Now, there are, as I said, 19th century Islamic thinkers who pondered these issues. There are also contemporary thinkers who pondered issues and has written important works and inspired important movements. And of course, I think the most important of them today is Sheikh Rashid Ghannouchi, who's in a Tunisian jail now because of a petty dictator who used the judiciary against him to put him in jail on bogus charges. Rashid Ghannouchi's, I think, emphases on freedom, as Dr. Marsh just actually mentioned in the previous panel, are really important and I think fundamental. I just would like to highlight two aspects of his thought which speak to the issues of the Sharia that I'm speaking about. One is that Sheikh Ghannouchi realized this historical function of the Sharia as something that constrained the rulers and keeps them in check. In a speech in 2013, a lecture titled Meanings and Rationales of the Post-Revolutionary Constitution, he even said the Islamic Sharia only came for the purpose of limiting the authority of the ruler and subjecting him to the law. Now that's a very grand claim. To say that it only came for that is actually maybe a little hyperbole, but he was emphasizing how it is important that the rulers are not acting out of their whim, and that was the main function that we had of law in Islam, and we have to revive that idea. Dr. Ghannouchi also spoke about freedom, the importance of freedom, and he actually went against these idea of punishing blasphemous ideas or banning the books of people who are secular or atheists or other religions and so on and so forth. His book, Public Freedoms in the Islamic State, includes very important insights. One of them is a quote that I got in my own book, Reopening Muslim Minds. And here he discusses what should Muslims do when there is an un-Islamic talk. When somebody writes a book that is atheistic, or somebody propagates Christianity, or some view that you don't like, what do you do about that? Should we not ban this? A lot of Sharia proponents would call for that. Rashid Ghannouchi says, if it is the Muslim's right, even his duty, to call his non-Muslim compatriot to Islam, it is also the latter's right to do the same on behalf of his faith. If Muslims fear for the fate of their fellow Muslims, there is no way to remedy this except for Muslims to deepen their own fate or to submit their doubts and question to their scholars. The antithetical viewpoints will reach Muslims by any means, and the only means of protection against any discussion is to offer another discussion, this one better, more intelligent, and more cogent. In other words, I mean, he defends the classical libertarian view of free speech. If people have bad ideas, have better ideas and counter them with ideas and not by coercion. I think this is the direction that Islamic thought needs to go and will ultimately go. And despite the turbulences in Tunisia, I think that country still has the democratic, Islamic, liberal potential to go forward. My country, Turkey, has taken a few bad turns, but I want to be optimistic about its future as well. And I think it's a lesson, Turkey-wise, that shows us that democracy is important, but just not about balance. It's about rule of law. It's about freedom of speech. It's about justice, which are actually the core values of Islam. And we have the roots of those, but we just have to reinterpret them as Hayrettin al-Tunusi did, as Dawud Kemal did, and Sheikh Rashid Khan has been doing lately. Thank you so much.